Hi, my name is Loren Landau. I'm a migration researcher at Oxford University and the University of the Witwatersrand in Johannesburg. I want to speak today about the ever-increasing amount of migration data and the quest launched from the OECD, launched from the global compacts to collect ever more data on migration into, out of, within the OECD and the rest of the world. And looking at this data, the way it's mobilized, the way it's collected, who's generating it, the way in which it is used, I think we have to have real notes of caution about the way in which the data works as a language. The data works to divide. The data works to draw boundaries where there are none, or where those boundaries are dangerous, or where those boundaries hide processes, hide connections, naturalize difference. We can see this in a number of ways. Perhaps most obvious is the framing itself, the very focus on the OECD, as if that is a natural category of countries, that migration into and out of the OECD is somehow fundamentally different, separable, distinguishable in a substantive, meaningful way from migration that might take place elsewhere in the world. That somehow migration into the OECD is also fundamentally different from migration within the OECD. Or that migration that takes place that doesn't touch directly the OECD, between Brazil and Venezuela or vice versa, between Zimbabwe and South Africa or vice versa, is somehow disconnected conceptually, somehow disconnected economically, somehow disconnected politically or socially from what is happening within. Yes, there are reasons to shade, there are reasons to distinguish, but these dichotomies work to naturalize a socio-political division that makes it harder to engage constructively. Instead, what we need is a focus and data that helps us see the connections between these multiple forms of migration. Migration within the North, migration within the South, or migration that is truly at a global level and doesn't make these distinctions between wealthy and poor. That understands that the reasons people move and the places that they move are not equally or easily separable into demographic data. Those data remain important, but the circulation of people can only be understood with the circulation of material goods, not just remittances, but investments of capital, trade, supply chains, and perhaps more importantly, connections that are forged by media, by migrants themselves, and by others that are social, that circulate forms of meaning, value, religion, and aspiration. What we need are data that increasingly highlight multiscalar connections, the corridors people follow, the corridors of information and goods, and the constellations that they form, so that we can start to see the connections between a village in rural Zimbabwe, a village in or the city of Sao Paulo, and what is happening in Paris. These are connections that people are forging, that have been forged by business, that have been forged by migration, that are formed and operate every day, but they become invisible in the kind of migration data that we collect and the basis on which we form so much of our policy.